You don't have to wait for a layoff or a rejection email to make a move. In this episode, we explore how to proactively pivot your career, especially if your current role is at risk due to AI, automation, and industry disruption.
It's just work. We're trying not to take it too seriously.
But really, it is your career and you need to take ownership of it. Yes, today we are talking about, um, you know, making a smart pivot after, and reinventing your career basically. So making a smart pivot and reinventing your career basically after a rejection or a layoff or something. As you've known, we've been discussing rejection proofing your career in this theme, and this is sort of like our last episode to wrap up this thing that we're talking about. So today
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about the career pivot and making that smart pivot. What you need to do, what you need to know, how to, get ready, before you are forced to leave or before you are forced to make a pivot. Basically, that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
All right. So, what are some signs it's time to pivot? Because we keep using this word pivot, transition, transition. But how do you know it's time? The first is you're getting passed over for roles you once qualified for, right? So, say you used to be this amazing champion in recruitment, but somehow you're not able to land a talent acquisition role. Why? What has changed? You haven't changed location. You haven't changed. You're still doing recruitment. So why are you being passed over? What has changed? What is a skill that is now relevant that you maybe haven't gotten? What are the new things happening in talent acquisition that you maybe haven't, you haven't explored? But basically, a telling sign is you being passed over for roles you once qualified for. The second is your responsibilities are shrinking. Your responsibilities are shrinking. You now have so much time on your hands. Hey, automation.
Yeah.
All the things you used to do, the people that will say things like, "Oh, I can do it in my sleep."
Yeah. Yes.
Now those things you can do in your sleep have been taken away from you, and then you just realize, my responsibilities have shrunk. That is a telling sign that you have to pivot. The third is your industry is slowing down or disappearing. Your industry is slowing down or disappearing. That is a telltale sign that you have to pivot. There's so many examples we could give around this. Even in consulting has evolved. I remember thinking of companies like Arthur Anderson back in the like when I was in secondary school, for instance, and the work they used to do. Like even in consulting, the services they provide to other organizations have evolved over time.
They
has
have
changed over time. So even though that industry hasn't completely disappeared, the service has completely changed. Right? If that is happening in the industry where you practice, know that it's time to pivot. As I'm talking, I'm trying to think of more examples that, even in banking, for instance. Remember what banking was like in the early 2000s?
Yes.
Remember?
Oh, definitely different. Like it's not even this. Like you almost can't recognize it or reconcile rather.
Yeah.
True.
I also I am old because I also remember when, not entirely, but I won't say I remember, but I know there was a time when typewriting was a skill.
Oh yes, it was. Oh, like someone who could do that shorthand writing.
Ooh, that shorthand, my goodness. And there are people who refuse to learn how to type on computers and keyboards because it just felt like typewriting is not going anywhere. Typewriting is not going anywhere, and they just like absolutely refuse to evolve. So that's another example. And the last I have here is you've hit a ceiling and don't feel challenged anymore. You've just hit a ceiling in that career. You've hit a ceiling in that position. And you just feel like, what more can I do? What more can I do other than what I do today? know that it's time to pivot, it's time to evolve, it's time to sometimes just expand what it is. Sometimes let me phrase that differently. Expand how you know what to do differently. Does that make sense?
Expand how you know. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Expand how you know what to do differently.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is how you do it
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
But maybe there are three more ways of doing it, right?
Find out what that should be.
Yeah.
Finding
out what that should be.
Thank you, Dekemz. That was really, really, those are really telltale signs. And I was speaking about the fact that where, like how your responsibility begins to reduce, shrink, and you're like, oh, maybe you have more time on your hands, but just I know automation has taken over. New technology, new softwares, and now even of course AI, and that even leads to the next point I was going to really just talk about is around now what would a successful pivot look like in this AI era, and really pivoting doesn't really, I think we didn't define it, and maybe we can just talk about what really was a career pivot, right?
Okay.
But I think it's it doesn't really require that you're changing or making a career change,
right?
No, pivoting actually could look like you're generalist, a HR generalist, for example, and now you're now a people analytics person or people analytics specialist or something in that sense.
Right.
You're still within the human resources, but you just transition into a different role and specialize into a different role. And I think as people pivot, don't get stuck on titles. Many times we just get stuck on those vice president, this one, senior manager, director, and all of those things. And just I think let's not get stuck on that. Just really focusing on that, the role, and see who titles help.
Nobody.
Like Dekemz said in our last episode around the fact that you're not building your personal brand, beyond your title. You're not your title. You're not that job title. It is you first. I find some people get stuck into this habit of when they need to introduce themselves, they use a title almost like you think that should be able to gather that respect.
Yeah.
You don't have to. So what happens when that is stripped away, right?
Yeah.
Like, is it like you won't now be able to recognize yourself, right? So it's important that people can look like that. And I just want you to, I know I digress a bit, but again, don't get stuck on titles. A journalist or something can become a content strategist, really, because it's still the same. It's transferable skills, doing the same thing but in a very different way. Right? Yep. A project manager, can become an agile coach or an AI implementation lead. It gives us the things so you're still doing the same thing that you're doing or in the same field, but you're not trying or specializing to something, different that is AI future proof. For lack of better words. I think that's just as you think about, what a successful pivot should look like. Don't think that it has to be, I'm a banker, I need to go and do nothing. Or I'm a HR person, I need to go into finance. It's not. Don't look at it like that's what a pivot means. It's really in what you're doing now. What other parts can you pivot into? Still using the same skills, same knowledge, but you've just sort of diversified in your career, and it's more like AI future proof or AI that is relevant to this AI era. Right. I think that's what something else that as we think about this this topic, something you can consider as well.
Absolutely. What is the pivot blueprint? Number one is self-audit. So in considering pivoting, and like Bukola said, it doesn't have to be an entire career change. Sometimes it's just evolving in the career that you already have. So the first is self-audit. What are your transferable skills? What are the skills you have today? For instance, a typewriter. What are I don't know why that comes to mind, but what are the skills you have today that can be transferred into this new world or new way of or ways of doing things? As an HR person, what are the skills you have today that can be transferred into being a people analytics lead? Right? You already have the data. You already do like what do you call it? Database management, like employee database management. You already know that this organization is 50% female and 50% male, for instance, right? So how what are the skills you have that you can transition into the career you're trying to evolve into? The second is market check. Where are the emerging roles growing?
Very
I was
key.
telling Bukola that I was watching a show on YouTube just before we started shooting today. And anyway, the people had to introduce themselves and what they do. And there were a lot of people who, certain professions were popular. I'm a virtual assistant. I do content creation, and I don't know, like, content creation and something about maybe content production, something like that. And I was just thinking, my goodness, these roles
Wow.
10 years ago, they didn't exist. Everybody is so big on content now. Like there's so many opportunities. Bukola and I were also talking about like brand strategists and whatnot. Like, and we're not talking about brand strategists in the traditional way of how we used to know them. We're talking about people who are able to help, for instance, virtual companies, build their brand and reputation. Again, 7 years ago, that didn't exist. So check the market. What are the emerging roles? Again, sometimes it's not like, for instance, what can HR do? Right? What can HR do in this era of content?
And there's so much.
Yes.
There's so
and
much.
bringing and not necessarily like what Bukola and I are doing, not necessarily having it as a side project, but bringing that learning into the organization. Right? So check the market, see where the market is leading you, and quickly follow, quickly evolve, and stuff like that.
Very key.
Then upskill. In quickly following and quickly evolving is also upskilling. Focus on tech plus human-centric skills, AI literacy, storytelling, stakeholder engagement. Storytelling is coming up again. Stakeholder engagement. How do I engage the people? How do I engage my stakeholders? Also, it's key to know who your stakeholders are. In the era we're living now, a stakeholder is also your online audience.
True.
Before we had the 4 traditional stakeholders: your customers, your suppliers,
Employees.
your stakeholders, and your employees. Now, like even in corporate, the online audience is also your stakeholder.
But you now like they evolve into like your community.
Exactly.
Now community and all.
So it's so important to like upskill. It's not enough to say, oh, my 4 traditional stakeholders. How do you also engage with your online audience as a business? So upskilling is so important, and there are different courses, there are different tools that can help you upskill. Sometimes it's even just a conversation. It doesn't have to be anything as structured as going into a classroom or registering for a course. You just sit down with a Gen Z and just let that person school you, let that person mentor you. Right. So that's so important. Upskilling. I normally joke with Bukola that she's a boomer stuck in a millennial body. Because there are things millennials know that Bukola doesn't know, and I'm like, oh my god. Bukola has failed to upskill as a millennial in pop culture. Let me put that caveat. Experiment, people. Experiment. Freelance. Consult. Shadow someone in your desired pivot. You want to learn about how to engage your online audience. They're 20-year-olds smashing it. Shadow them. Some of you, it's your nephew's friends, your nephews, your nieces. Call them, shadow them, consult, freelance, experiment with. Like, what's the worst that could happen? Open yourself up for these changes and experimentation. Network with intent. Use LinkedIn to connect with people already in your target role. There's so many people who have gotten it right. There's so many people who have pivoted, who have evolved. And it's okay to learn from them. You should learn from them. Reach out to them, ask questions. If they're having all this like Instagram live or they're having a master class, I know we make faces at master classes and whatnot, but sometimes they're teaching things, they're passing on
Yeah.
information that is relevant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, they came spot on. There's so many things that you were saying that just were just coming to mind. When you talk about the content creation thing and how when people introduce it as well, that's what they do on their
Yeah.
career. I remember I was reading something maybe on IG, and where it was like a debate where, like, do you need a videographer and a content creator at your wedding? I'm like, okay, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
When the content creator now become part of the like the events the guys that you
Yeah.
would hire for your event,
Yeah.
and then someone then said, and the comments were all actually literally in favor of both. In fact, some people said I'll choose a content creator over a videographer. And the reason this person
Wow.
was saying that was that content creators capture those very those moments that a videographer will not capture, because they just sort of collage, do like a collage of all, like say some things and some things, but
Yeah.
because like all those tiny details and all that, and somehow those videos end up becoming the ones that will go viral
Yeah.
and things like that. Like, so, and I just realized it just, I was like, yeah, content creator for your wedding. Wow. As in, wow. Like, initially it was like, oh, what do you need a videographer for? In fact, Dekemz was first a video person. Just video, not videographer. Video, like, just you're not watching the album, watching your like all the things that we grew up with. And then it evolved into, okay, videographer, they do like a really nice shot of like a collage of all your everything that happened that day, reel and all that. Really lovely. And then now content creator. So again, I think that's just just to show that really the opportunity is there, but then just learn, explore, experiment, and see what's happening out there. But I think to just sort of maybe tie all of these things together, we know that pivoting it's not easy. All of these things we are saying, even Dekemz and I, this whole since we started this podcast, we're still learning. And it's not easy. Like, it takes a lot of commitment, a lot of try and error, and all of those things. There's so much that goes into this, right? So we're not saying it's work in the park, right? It's not easy, but it's totally worth it. So it will feel scary, no doubt, but it's often, I think, in rejection proofing your career, I think it's one of the key things that would help you, that long-term strategy, that long-term view. I think this sort of making a smart pivot is what is just that missing piece to just help you rejection proof your career. So whether it's getting bouncing back from a layoff, whether it's just from a rejection that you got in from an interview or something, or whether it's just even how to navigate this AI era, because those as well can lead to a rejection. The AI can also fuel a rejection or fuel a layoff and all of that. But I think if you're able to just make a smart pivot now before you are forced to, I think now is the time, and you should definitely look inward and begin to take those steps right now.
I just remembered one of those adages growing up: make hay while the
sun shines. Literally. Literally.
Now you have the opportunity to. Now that you haven't been laid off, start preparing yourself. Start looking for where these opportunities are. And learning is part of being a human. Learning is part of living. Right? As long as you're living, you're learning. You have to. You can't be closed off to learning. And that brings us to the end of our episode today. Also brings us to the end of career proofing your
rejection proofing
your career. And I really hope you've learned a couple things, and I hope we have been helpful as usual. We wish you well as you begin to pivot, as you begin to evolve and embrace change and experiment. It's not always, like Bukola said, it's not always going to be a walk in the park. Sometimes you will meet roadblocks.
Absolutely.
But just learning to rise above it. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.